Brass tacks.
Our expression today is getting down to brass tacks. It means to get serious about something, to get to the bottom of the situation. For example, a man may say, "I want to work for you, but how much will you pay me?" He is getting down to brass tacks. Or a woman may ask, "You say you love me. Will you marry me?" She, too, is getting down to brass tacks. How did this expression get started? There are several ideas. At one time, most women made their own clothes, buying the cloth in small stores. The material was kept in large rolls, and the storekeeper cut off as much as a woman wanted. Brass tacks along his work table helped him measure the exact amount. Sometimes a busy storekeeper might try to guess how much material to cut off. But this would not be correct. He could get an exact measure only by laying the material down along the brass tacks. One word expert, however, has another theory. He believes the expression came from seamen who cleaned the bottoms of boats. Strong, heavy devices called bolts held the ship's bottom together. These bolts were made of copper. The seamen had to clean the ship down to the copper bolts. American speech soon changed the words copper bolts into brass tacks. Another idea is that the expression began when furniture was made by hand. Brass tacks were used around the bottom part of the chair. The brass tacks showed that the chair was built to be strong. When something went wrong with the chair, someone quickly examined the bottom to discover the trouble. In other words, someone got down to the brass tacks. No one is sure where the expression first was used, but everyone is sure what it means today. It is used by people who dislike empty words. They seek quick, direct answers. They want to get to the bottom of a situation. There are others, however, who have no such desire. They feel there is some risk in trying to get down to brass tacks. This happened in the case of a critic who made the mistake of reading a play written by a close friend. The critic disliked the play a lot. He felt his friend should not be writing plays, but he said nothing. This silence troubled the writer. He demanded that his friend, the critic, say something about the play. The writer finally heard the critic's opinion, and this getting down to brass tacks ended a long friendship.
Mangrove forests could be a big player in carbon trading.
A new report says mangrove forests store more planet-warming carbon dioxide than almost any other ecosystem on Earth. The report says loss of these forests is releasing large amounts of greenhouse gases in Earth's atmosphere. Greenhouse gases trap warm air in the atmosphere. Most climate scientists believe the gases are responsible, at least in part, for climate change. Mangrove forests are found along coasts in tropical countries. The warm water often serves as a home for fish and other creatures. The plants and trees also help protect coastal areas from storm damage.
The new report was published in the journal Nature Geoscience. Daniel Donato works with the United States Forest Service. He and his team studied tree mass, dead wood, and soil carbon in 25 mangrove ecosystems in the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Mr. Donato says these areas are among the most carbon-rich forests in the world. He found that mangroves store about 3 to 4 times more carbon per hectare as temperate forests or even tropical rainforests. But Mr. Donato says most of the carbon is hidden. The carbon is found mainly in the soil and tree roots.
About 1/3 to 1/2 of the world's mangrove forests have been cut down in the past 50 years. Some of the forests were cut for wood or wood products. Others were lost to coastal development or aquaculture. Mangroves make up less than 1% of all tropical forests. Mr. Donato says the report should get the attention of policymakers.
It shows mangroves are probably pretty good candidates for things like carbon market trading to encourage sustainable forest management.
Some activists say carbon markets could be a powerful force for protecting the environment. In such a market, industries can buy the right to produce carbon dioxide in exchange for protecting forests or taking other steps. Emily Pigeon works for the group Conservation International. She says the value of the mangrove often is not clear to policymakers.
By suddenly having an actual mechanism to value these systems in dollars, it gives you a potentially very large new mechanism for countering the other financial and economic arguments.
Other groups are considering the economics of mangrove protection from the buyer's side. They have urged Western supermarkets and other large buyers to only purchase farmed seafood that has little effect on mangrove loss. Emily Pigeon says one way to help developing countries value mangroves is to see them as something that provides many services. Those services could include protecting the fisheries that many coastal communities depend on for food and jobs. For many communities, carbon storage is just the latest service they may see mangroves provide.
There it stands, on the border of Nepal and Tibet, 8,850 meters high. Some natives call it Chomolungma, or Goddess Mother of the World. But most people know it as Mount Everest, the highest mountain on Earth. The sky near the top is a beautiful blue color. New snow lies deep and white. Everything is clear and cold and clean. Or at least it once was clean. That was before people began to climb the mountain and leave behind thousands of kilograms of trash. But help is on the way. 2 mountain climbers from Nepal are leading a team that hopes to remove much of the trash.
What kind of things have been left up there? The list is long. there are temporary shelters, ropes, oxygen bottles, clothing, sleeping bags, food, and bodies. Over 200 people have died trying to climb Mount Everest. Many of their bodies are still there, completely frozen. This all started in 1921. British climbers were the first to try to reach the place called the top of the world. They quickly discovered that going up was hard work, but getting back down safely was even more difficult. The first problem is the weather. It can change quickly. The temperature can quickly drop to 40 degrees below 0 Celsius. Winds can reach hurricane speed. Fingers and toes freeze, even if they are covered in thick protective material.
The next big worry is the lack of oxygen in the air. The higher a climber goes, the thinner the air. Areas near the top of the mountain have only about 30% of the oxygen found at sea level. What climbers have learned is that they must carry a lot of oxygen bottles and other supplies up the mountain if they ever hope to reach the top. But because of the cold weather and lack of oxygen, many climbers become very sick. Getting off the mountain alive is hard enough. Cleaning up all the trash on the way down is nearly impossible.
What about all those bodies left on Mount Everest? Why are they still there? Experts say it is because they are too heavy to bring down. Climbers are told that if they get sick high on the mountain or fall and break a bone, they should not expect help. Many climbers have become so tired they have sat down to rest and never gotten up. So Appa Sherpa, Dawa Stephen Sherpa, and their team have decided to clean up the mountain. They will be paid a small amount for each kilogram of objects they bring down. But the team's leaders say the money is not important. They want to do this for their country and the world.
There have been 3 other attempts in recent years to clean Mount Everest, but this is the first attempt at removing trash from the death zone. That is the level above 8,000 meters. Up there, the thin air and cold can kill a person very quickly. Appa Sherpa knows where to find much of the trash on Mount Everest. He has climbed to the top a record 20 times since 1990.
Finally, the National Science Foundation will honor 3 leading scientists at a dinner tonight in Washington, D.C. The 3 are being recognized for their success in science, engineering, and technology. The National Science Foundation, or NSF, is an independent agency of the federal government. It supports research and education in all areas of science and engineering. Casey Dunn is a biologist at Brown University in Rhode Island. He is being honored for his work on animal evolution and the origins of biological complexity. His investigations have involved deep-sea creatures called siphonophores. The National Science Foundation says his work has helped increase understanding about how evolution affects the diversity of life. Casey Dunn will receive the Alan T. Waterman Award. It is the NSF's highest honor for scientists 35 years old or younger. He will also receive $500,000 over 3 years to help finance his research.
Another honoree is the president of the National Academy of Engineering, Charles Vest. He will receive the Vannevar Bush Award for his leadership in science and technology. Mr. Vest served as president of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology from 1990 until 2004. He has also served as a director of the chemical company DuPont and of IBM, and he served on several federal committees.
The NSF also plans to present its Public Service Award to Moira Gunn. She was the first woman to earn a Ph.D. in mechanical engineering from Purdue University in Indiana. She currently serves as the Managing Director of Biotechnology Programs at the University of San Francisco. Ms. Dunn is being recognized for increasing public understanding of science and engineering. In 1993, she created the radio program Tech Nation. The program examines the effect of science and technology on our everyday lives. The National Science Foundation will also present a second Public Service Award Tuesday night. It is going to the Exploratorium Museum in San Francisco.
Teaching children how to think internationally.
The International Primary Curriculum is an idea that began in Britain 8 years ago. Today, this curriculum is taught in more than 1,000 primary schools in 58 countries, including the United States. Educator Martin Skelton co-wrote the International Primary Curriculum, or IPC. He says for children to learn and succeed, they need a program that permits them to learn individually.
Our view is the teachers should really be thinking about their kids in their class and why they're not learning, and trying to work out what they're going to be doing tomorrow to help individual kids learn much better.
He says the idea with the curriculum is to help today's children become good citizens of the world and 21st century leaders.
Most world problems are going to be solved internationally now. I mean, no any single country is going to solve the environment or terrorism. It's a multi-cooperational activity.
Mr. Skelton says the curriculum has activities built around the development of international mindedness, starting from the age of 5.
We encourage the kids to make links with schools in other countries, and of course, things like Skype now make that fantastically easy to do.
The British American School of Los Angeles is one of a few American private schools that teach the International Primary Curriculum. Second-grade teacher Allison Kerr says the main goal is to engage children in the learning process. This term, for example, her class is learning about people important in history.
I got the children to come in secret and dress up with subtle clues of a famous person. They had to research and bring us 10 written clues, and the rest of the class had to guess who these significant people were. So the children do not simply just do the same worksheet type of format every single time.
The British school in Boston held a fair for students and parents called Around the World in a Day. Emma Northey, head of primary learning at the school, says 51 nationalities were represented. She described one activity designed to teach about similarities between different cultures.
Children were each given a passport, and they basically knew that they were going around the world in a day. And we said to them they had to come back with 2 similarities that they'd seen between the different cultures. And even the 3-year-olds came up to me and they said, gosh, you know, everybody writes, but some people write going downwards, some people write from left to right, and some write from right to left.
Another educator, Kate Foy of the British School in Washington, says the teacher's role is to enable students to discover for themselves.
And you kind of have to sit back a little bit. You have to make sure you're asking the right questions, you maneuver yourself around the classroom and enable the children to learn as opposed to telling them.
Much of Africa not investing enough in agricultural research.
Investing in agricultural research and development can help poor countries fight hunger and poverty. A new study says investments in sub-Saharan Africa increased by more than 20% between 2001 and 2008. But the study also found that just a few countries were responsible for most of that growth. Nigeria was responsible for 1/3 of it. Ghana, Tanzania, Sudan, and Uganda also increased their spending. But 13 countries decreased their investments. Yinka Baintma from the Washington-based International Food Policy Research Institute led the study. She says new technologies are needed to deal with some of the causes of hunger.
Food price volatility, growing population, water scarcity, climate change. There's a more demand on better technologies or different technologies to address these issues.
She says some countries, including Nigeria, have increased their investments after spending far too little in the past.
It's a positive sign because it is more commitment from the government. But Nigeria had extremely low levels of agricultural research funding. And I was there for the first time in 2000 or 2001, and I visited institutes that could not function. They even didn't have a phone line, or they didn't have gas for the cars, one computer that didn't work.
Nigeria now has the largest agricultural research system south of the Sahara. That is one measure of progress. But Yinka Baintma says a better measure is whether a country is spending more than 1% of its agricultural money on research. And in 2008, she says, Nigeria was not doing that. Botswana, Burundi, Kenya, Mauritania, and Mauritius were spending more than 1%. So were Namibia, South Africa, and Uganda. Ms. Baintma examined levels of funding and employment at 370 research centers in 32 countries. She believes most countries depend too heavily on international donations to help pay for research. Many donations are short-term, she says, and the research often ends when the money has been spent. Ms. Baintma says countries must improve their higher education systems to get more qualified researchers. But the study found that new researchers are not being hired in some countries because of budget problems. At the same time, many older researchers are nearing retirement age. Private industry may be able to help if governments cut their spending. Some cooperatives, for example, raise money for research into important crops.
The evolution of spacesuits.
Today, we tell about the special clothes astronauts wear that protect them while they work in space.
Many questions had to be answered over 60 years ago when officials first began to think about placing a human being in space. One of the most important was how to design the special clothing needed to protect a person from the dangers of the space environment. A person cannot work in the extremes of space without many different kinds of protection. The cold of space will freeze skin in a short time. The fierce heat of the sun can cause severe burns. The lack of atmosphere can cause gases and fluids in the body to expand and even burst. And with no oxygen to breathe, a human being will die in only a few moments. Any of these extreme conditions would mean a quick death for someone who did not wear special protective clothing. Ultraviolet radiation from the sun is another environmental risk in space. So is damage from small pieces of rock and objects like meteoroids.
When humans explore and do useful work in space, they must take their natural environment with them. The American Space Agency, NASA, provides astronauts with a number of things that work together to create a protective environment. An astronaut who does work outside the space shuttle usually is wearing more than 17 pieces of protective equipment.
The atmosphere is about 20% oxygen and 80% nitrogen from Earth's surface to where space begins at 120 kilometers up. Yet, up at about 5,400 meters, the air pressure is only about half of what it is on the ground. At about 19,000 meters, the air is so thin and the amount of oxygen so small that a person needs a lot of special equipment to survive. A well-known American flyer, Wiley Post, designed one of the first successful devices to protect a pilot at extreme heights. In 1933, he developed protective clothing that made it possible for him to fly very high. Today, aircraft are designed to prevent air pressure changes at extreme heights, but this was not yet possible in 1933.
Wiley Post made this protective clothing with the help of the Phillips Petroleum Company and the B.F. Goodrich Company. It appeared to be something a person would wear to stay underwater for long periods of time. A large device that looked like a can surrounded the pilot's head. A small window in the front permitted him to see. Wiley Post's protective clothing was made of rubber. It could hold oxygen and provide the needed air pressure to protect his body from the lack of pressure at extreme heights. This protective suit was only used a few times, but it permitted Mr. Post to fly as high as 15,000 meters. That was higher than any person had ever flown. Mr. Post did not know it, but he had designed the first real spacesuit. His suit is now part of the collection of the Smithsonian Institution's Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C.
Astronauts in NASA's Mercury program flew the first American space flights in the early 1960s. Each set of protective clothing was specially made for each astronaut. The clothing was similar to that invented by Wiley Post, and it presented some of the same problems. When air pressure filled the early spacesuit, astronauts found it difficult to move their arms or legs. It was a little like trying to change the shape of a balloon. The pressure inside the suit provided protection, but made it difficult for the astronaut to move in a natural way. Mercury astronauts usually wore the suit without air pressure inside. The Mercury spacecraft had the needed atmospheric pressure to keep the astronauts safe. The astronauts wore the suit as a safety device in case the spacecraft suddenly lost air pressure.
Today, astronauts wear very different protective clothing. It lets them move, do useful tasks, and stay outside their spacecraft in comfort and safety for several hours. For the next few minutes, imagine you are in the space shuttle about to go out to work in space.
You will wear a spacesuit to work in the open cargo area of the Space Shuttle Discovery, which returned from its last flight last month. The spacesuit is called the Shuttle Extravehicular Mobility Unit, or EMU. It was designed to last longer and to permit more movement than earlier spacesuits. The EMU has a number of parts that an astronaut can link together by using only one hand. The different parts are in different sizes. This makes it possible for each astronaut to select the parts that fit correctly. Wearing the whole EMU can add as much as 90 kilograms to your weight. Yet the lack of gravity in space means you will not feel the added weight.
You will be wearing equipment that will send medical information back to the NASA Control Center in Houston, Texas. Doctors will observe your medical condition while you work in space. You also will wear a device that will collect urine, the body's liquid waste. You will be working outside the space shuttle for about 5 hours. This collection device can become very necessary.
You will also wear something called the Liquid Cooling and Ventilation Garment. This piece of clothing is worn next to the skin. It helps keep the body cool by moving water through many small tubes that cover the device. The heat from the sun can reach 120 degrees Celsius in orbit. The material of the spacesuit helps protect against this heat. The liquid cooling device also works to keep your body from becoming too hot.
You will also put on a container that holds water to drink. A small tube stays near your mouth so you can drink water during your stay in space. A special hat on your head is made of soft cloth. It also carries several communications devices, including earphones and microphones. These communication devices will permit you to talk with other astronauts working outside the shuttle and with crew members inside the shuttle. You can also talk with the control center in Houston, Texas. The lower part of the spacesuit is next. It is called the lower torso assembly. It is like putting on a large pair of pants that have boots built in the bottom of the legs.
Next comes the upper part of the spacesuit. It is made of a hard, plastic-like material. To put it on, you must hold your arms over your head and rise up into the upper part of the suit. The upper part of the suit also holds the primary life support system. The life support system supplies the oxygen needed for breathing and the air pressure necessary to protect your body. The upper part of the spacesuit also carries an emergency oxygen system in case the first system fails. An important part of your spacesuit is the control module. It lets you observe and control your oxygen system. It is also the place you find the controls for your communications equipment. And it tells you if you are having a problem with any of the spacesuit's devices.
NASA scientists are also considering the kind of spacesuits that would be needed for exploration on the planet Mars. Because of the gravity on Mars, spacesuits may have to be designed to be lighter than suits used in orbit or on the Moon. The equipment may also have to protect astronauts from dust carried in the winds on Mars. And they must be easy to repair and keep clean during a longer flight to and from the Red Planet.
All of the spacesuits that have returned from space belong to the Smithsonian Institution. Most of the suits are stored in a building about 10 kilometers from Washington. They are kept in a room where air temperature and moisture levels are carefully controlled. The old spacesuits break easily. They were designed to protect the astronaut, and how they would last after a space operation was not a big consideration. Smithsonian experts must pay special attention to protect these suits because they help to tell the story of space exploration.
Bernanke meets the press in a first for U.S. Central Bank.
Central bankers have to choose their words carefully, so they often say little in public, or little that makes sense. But the United States Central Bank says it is trying to be more clear and timely in communicating its policies. The latest example, a press conference by Chairman Ben Bernanke. Wednesday's event was the first of its kind in the 98-year history of the Federal Reserve. In his opening comments, Mr. Bernanke explained a decision by the Federal Open Market Committee to leave its main short-term interest rate near zero. The committee had just completed a 2-day meeting.
The committee continues to anticipate that economic conditions, including low rates of resource utilization, subdued inflation trends, and stable inflation expectations, are likely to warrant exceptionally low levels for the federal funds rate for an extended period.
In other words, the economy is not growing fast enough to worry about inflation. A reporter asked what an extended period means to the Fed. Mr. Bernanke said it suggests a couple of meetings probably, but it all depends on the economy. The chairman said it is very hard to blame the American public for being impatient with the speed of the recovery, but he pointed out that unemployment is still high, 8.8% in March. Oil and gasoline prices are high, and the housing market remains very weak. The committee said it will complete purchases of $600 billion in Treasury securities in June. The Fed launched the bond buying program late last year in an effort to keep interest rates low and strengthen the economy. Some economists say this second round of what is known as quantitative easing, or QE2, has not been effective. Mr. Bernanke disagreed and pointed to examples like gains in stock prices. The Fed has two main goals for its monetary policy: the highest possible employment rates and stable prices. The bank faced criticism for intervening, either too little to some critics or too much to others, in the financial crisis. The press conference produced no surprises. Yet, as recently as the middle of the 1990s, the Fed did not even release its decisions or its interest rate targets to the public. Today, the Fed is trying to reach out to Americans through ways like this video on its website.
Hi, I'm Ben Bernanke, Chairman of the Federal Reserve System. The Fed, as it's often called.
The Fed announced in March that Mr. Bernanke will hold 4 press briefings a year. The next of 3 planned for this year will follow a decision on interest rates in June.
Using the internet and social media to search for a job.
The job market is more competitive than ever for millions of workers around the world. In America, one reason right now is the slow recovery in job growth after the recession. But other reasons involve changes in the needs of the American and global economies. In big developing economies like India and China, high turnover rates mean workers often move from job to job. These days, many job seekers go online to connect with employers. Job candidates want to show that they have a lot to offer. But in many cases, they simply apply for a job title and list their work experience. Instead, they should describe the talents and abilities they could bring to an organization. That is the advice of Steve Langerud, Director of Professional Opportunities at DePauw University in Indiana. He advises students on career planning and often talks about workplace issues in the media. He says social media sites are valuable when they show the abilities of job candidates and not just their job title and experience.
This really is a talent economy, and we're stuck with most job seekers presenting themselves in a job title mode, and I don't think it matches very well.
Steve Langerud says employers, too, should change their search methods. They should think harder about the skills they really need to help their organization reach its goals.
Because at the end of the day, it's still about getting the right people in the right place at the right time and then keeping them.
Ben Kirshner is the founder and chief executive of a media marketing company based in New York called Elite SEM. SEM is search engine marketing. His company's job is to help businesses improve their websites and search engine results. Ben Kirshner says when his company is searching for candidates for new positions, it first looks within. It considers existing employees. After that, he says, social sites can be valuable for finding new people.
25% of our new hires come from the social media. 75% typically come from word of mouth.
In other words, 3 out of 4 people are found based on recommendations from others. Elite SEM uses sites like Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn to learn about job candidates. LinkedIn is a networking site for professionals, so users might be more careful about what they say. Mr. Kirshner says a site like Facebook can also provide a lot of information, good or bad, about a person. So pay attention to what you put on the internet and what others put online about you.
A false sense of security on the internet?
Sony officials
held a news conference last week in Tokyo.
Again, we'd like to offer our deepest and sincerest apologies to the millions of registered PlayStation Network and Kiosk users around the world.
They apologized for the theft of personal information from millions of users of the company's online services. Hackers targeted Sony's PlayStation Network, Sony Online Entertainment, and Curiosity music systems. In all, Sony says information may have been stolen from more than 100 million accounts. The data includes information like names, addresses, phone numbers, and birth dates. In some cases, even credit and debit card numbers may have been stolen. The United States Federal Bureau of Investigation is looking into the cyber attacks. Sony shut down its PlayStation Network on April 20th. The company is being criticized for not telling its users about the stolen information until a week later. Sony has also been criticized for not making its accounts more secure by encrypting the data. Sony officials say they have now taken steps to improve security. Peter Warren is chairman of the Cyber Security Research Institute in London. His group studies technology crimes and their effects on our computer-dependent world. Mr. Warren points out that what happened at Sony is not rare.
We've seen a number of very large companies that have suffered some tremendously embarrassing losses of data. So I actually think that it's a learning curve for everybody.
The problem, says Mr. Warren, is that there is far more interest in developing technology than in keeping it safe.
There is a very real issue with the onward speed of technological progress and the fact that lots and lots of people are being allowed to connect a lot of technology up before it's really been particularly well tested.
Peter Warren also points out that many people have a false sense of security on the Internet.
If they're walking down the street, they have many of their senses with them, and they're very, very aware of strangers. On the Internet, they seem to be so blindly trusting of anybody and of any website, no matter how suspicious it may look.
His message to users is simple. Try to be more careful online.
Everybody just really needs to be aware that the Internet is just like any other street, and that there are some twists and turns that can take you into some very, very unsavory places.